Hello and welcome to another Inner Core Tai-Chi video. My name is Cain Yentzer, and today I'm doing a follow-up video from my last video, which was about standing. In that video, I made a very strong suggestion that people should look at standing as a more integral part of their practice, especially if you've reached a plateau in your practice and you don't feel like you're getting any more internal or any better. So in that video, I said I might do a follow-up video where I would go over the fine points of standing. That's what I'm going to do today. So, caveat, if you're a beginner, a new beginner, and you're trying to learn Tai-Chi from a video, please get an instructor, okay? It's pretty much impossible to learn Tai-Chi from a video. A lot of people have the concept that Tai-Chi is a movement-only exercise, and that if you imitate those movements, then you're doing Tai-Chi. Nothing could be further from the truth. You're more than welcome to watch the video, but please understand this is supplementary, meaning that you should already have an instructor and you're just using this as supplementary or to get a different perspective on things. So with that said, let me start with the statement that Tai-Chi, Zhan Zhuang, standing, and Neigong, at least in the beginning, first 10, 20 years, is for the development of this thing called Jin. All right, and Jin is a Chinese word, and basically it can be translated as intrinsic energy. There's no direct translation. Sometimes you get the translation of strength with it, which it is, but a lot of the times when we think of strength, we think of muscular strength, where you're developing the muscles, making them bigger, making them more efficient. That's a very Western idea, and nothing's wrong with that, but we kind of go in the opposite direction in Tai-Chi and Zhan Zhuang and Neigong. And we are developing the connective tissue in the body. So this involves releasing the muscles so that the connective tissue is loose and we can manipulate it, twist it, turn it, pull it, and it changes. All right, and once it changes, then what comes forth is this springy energy or springy strength called Jin. And that is what basically the focus for Tai-Chi is, both for health and only for health if you want to only do health, or for martial, if you want to do martial. They both branches use this Jin, okay? So, that said, keep that in the back of your head when I'm talking about things, and everything we're doing is to get to that goal of producing this Jin, or changing the sinews. So let me start with another idea, and that is stretching, all right? So I'm going to make another statement, and it might be, you might misunderstand it, but Tai-Chi is really stretching. Neigong is really stretching, and Zhan Zhuang is really stretching. Problem is, when we think of stretching, well, how do we think of it? What's our concept of stretching? So, a fallacy about stretching is that you maybe put your leg up on the windowsill and then you start leaning forward and you're stretching your leg. And a lot of people think that when they bend over, they're pulling on the muscle and making the muscle longer. Well, if you lean over and then slowly you can start to reach your toe, well, the muscles must be getting longer. And that is kind of a fallacy, because once you're an adult, your relaxed muscle is only one length. It won't get any longer. All right? So what actually is happening when you're stretching and then you find that you're getting a little bit more limber is actually you're letting go of the muscle, and the muscle is releasing and it's going to its original relaxed length. So one way to demonstrate this is if you find someone who says, oh, I'm not limber, and they go in for an operation where the doctor or the surgeon gives them anesthesia and they go under and the mind is gone, so therefore the tension is gone. Well, those muscles all relax because the tension is no longer there. And the doctor can take their leg and make them touch their nose with their toes, and that's simply because there's no tension there. So when I say stretching, and when I say Tai-Chi, Neigong, and Zhan Zhuang are stretching exercises, what I mean is they're releasing exercises. Releasing. So the word for stretch really should be release. And I want you to think about the word stretching and understanding release when you're doing your Zhan Zhuang and when you're doing your Tai-Chi. All right? So we're actually stretching if you understand what stretching is. Releasing. So that said, let's start with the ground up. So Tai-Chi, you always start with the ground up because it's more about the lower body than the upper body. Obviously the upper body is involved, but Always start at the lower body. That's our foundation. If that's off, everything's off. You've heard these sayings before. If you find something incorrect, look for the incorrect problem in the waist. All right, that goes for the legs too. So we're going to start at the bottom of the body where the feet are, and I'm going to talk about some points that you should already know if you're studying Tai Chi. But if you don't know where these points are physically, I made another video a while back showing where these points are physically. You can refer to that video, but I don't have time now to show you physically. So I'm just going to talk about them. And then we're going to start with the bubbling wells. All right. So your bubbling wells are at the bottom of your feet, or at the center of your feet. And this is the point that should be making the energetic contact with the ground. And the way to do this, or a way to imagine this, or a way to start this is when you start doing your standing, you can try to feel your gravity going through your body, through your legs, and down through this point, or you can just feel your weight draining into this point. Either kind of way of thinking about it or conceptualizing them is correct. What you don't want to do is be sitting in your heels or coming forward into your toes. All right, this sets your structure off incorrectly. All right, so if you think about a skyscraper and you start with the foundation of the skyscraper, that foundation has to be dead on. It can't be off by even a couple of millimeters, because as soon as you start to build it, everything above it is going to be more and more off the higher you go. Same thing here. This is your foundation. Make sure your bubbling wells are firmly in contact with the ground. The whole foot, every part of the foot except maybe parts of the arch, are touching the ground, but the concentration is going into the bubbling wells. All right, very, very important. So as I stand here, I'm feeling my bubbling wells get all that pressure. Now, every part of my foot is touching the ground, but the bubbling wells, that's where all my weight is draining into. Now, another thing with the feet is that if you're doing this Uji stance, which I'm doing now, I'm just picking this stance because it's the easiest to show you, you want to make sure your feet are parallel. What does that mean? A lot of people don't understand parallel. Parallel means you want to look at the middle toe, not the instep of the foot. So if you look at the instep, you might start doing this, all right? And also you need to pay attention if you're standing and your feet, start to migrate in this manner. Make sure the feet are parallel. All right, this is for the sake of the hips. All right, if your hips are tight, your feet are going to start to migrate out like this. All right, so that's my main couple of points for the feet. Now, in order to sit down into the feet properly, you have to have relaxed joints. And the lower the joint in the body, as far as foundation goes, the more important it is. And the first big joint is the ankles. So you need to make sure your ankles are relaxed. If your ankles are not relaxed, you will be getting pushed back. Usually the tension is in the front. Okay, you can also have tension in the back. But if you have tense ankles and you tend to grip in your ankles, engage those ankles, it's going to freeze you and push you back. All right, and then if you're trying to get into the bubbling wells, you're going to compensate above, and then your structure is off. So find a good stretching exercise for the ankles before you do your standing so that they are bending properly, okay? And if the ankles are not, they're off, not bending all the way, not released all the way by maybe a centimeter, that's really going to push everything back. It's going to affect your knees too. So make sure you pay attention to the ankles being relaxed. You might think, oh, my ankles are relaxed. Make sure, okay? And the next joint up are the knees, and the knees need to be bent. All right, the more you're able to let the knees go, and when I say bent, I mean letting the knees go, not bending from the knees. That's a whole different thing. The more the knees are able to bend, the easier it is to let this coccyx relax down and tuck under. All right, and if you've done Tai Chi for a while, you know that this is extremely important. Okay, this is what connects the upper and lower body, and the first rule to that is making sure those knees are bent. That gives space for the upper body to be manipulated and the spine to get straight. All right, but this doesn't mean using muscle and bending like this. I see a lot of people do that. No, it's relaxing into the legs to bend the knees, not bending the knees from the knees. You'll just end up doing this with your knees, and it's not good. All right, so from the feet down up to the hips, talking about the legs as a whole, you want to create this bow, and not the bow you tie, but the bow you shoot. It should feel like a bow, like you're sitting on a bow. You should feel like you have two bows, as a matter of fact. And if you want to get real detailed, well, you can think about this angle as a bow and this angle as a bow, and they sit on each other, and the bow is nothing but a spring, really. So you're creating these springs that your upper body sits on too. Now the next point up on the body is this hoi ing, and it's at the base of the pelvic floor, in between your anus and your genitals. And you need to connect the bubbling wells with this point, which means what? You should feel a hard energy in the legs. And when I say hard, I don't mean muscular tension. Once you really relax, everything can compact, the tendons open, it opens like a net, and then it becomes taut, but not because the muscles are taut, it's just relaxed and reached its polarity of opening. All right, that's what you're going for. And that is when you start to get this hardness coming up from the floor, and it fills the legs, and you want to feel that hardness, Tai-Chi hardness, from the bubbling wells to the hoi ing. All right, and it's not something imaginary, it's something that you can actually feel. It feels like you're sitting into a chair once you get this correct. All right, now something else, just a little something else you should look for. Make sure the front of the knees, under the kneecaps, don't get dry and tired. If that's happening, you're probably leaning too forward. Just a little something to pay attention to. The legs should not feel dry and then pieces feel off, while other pieces don't feel worked. In the beginning, it's going to take a while. You have to really sit into the legs, make them tired, and make them give up. All right, that's how you develop this. All right, so coming up, I'm going to go up the back and then down the front. Coming up, we next have the tailbone, which needs to hang down. This is all the same as our Tai-Chi, and I don't need to turn, actually, we have a camera right there. But this needs to tuck under, not by force, because if you use force, your abdomen is going to be engaged, and I'll get to that in a second. It's very important not to use the muscles in the abdomen. Don't think about core when we do this. A lot of people say core. Try to remove that from your thinking in this. Not that there's not core in this, but the core in different practices are different. But anyways, you don't want to engage your core muscularly to get this coccyx tucked under, all right? And the feeling in the coccyx is that it's being pulled down by a weight, all right? So you can imagine there's a magnet in your tailbone, and the floor is a magnet, and they're attracting, and it's pulling down. It literally feels like that. When that happens, coming to the next point, this Mingmen can start to open with help from Bai Hui, which I'll get to in a second. So when this Mingmen opens, and that's one of the major things you're looking for after the legs or with the legs, is this Mingmen opening, and you can feel it open. It just opens, and it just, that point starts to feel really comfortable. Usually you have tension there, and the area around the Mingmen, which is right behind the belly button on the spine, flattens out from in all directions out from the Mingmen. All right, it really flattens out, and it's a really comfortable, good, strong feeling. That's what you're looking for in the Mingmen. All right, so let's go up the back to the top of the back of the top of the spine, where the head or the skull is connected to the spine, where there's a point called Yu Zhan. I'm not sure on the exact tones there, but it's jade pillow. And this point wants to rise in conjunction of, we've all heard this, suspension from above from our Bai Hui. All right, so we're pulling up here, bringing the chin in, leveling off the skull. That's what's happening. We're leveling off the skull, and this is why you need a teacher, because this understanding this is actually kind of difficult. Even though it's easy to explain, it's actually hard. I watch students struggle with this. They try to do it by raising their chin, which is a no-no. We need to bring the chin in, push the neck back onto the rest of the spine, raise this point, at the same time suspend ourselves from above. All right, so this addresses the whole back all the way down, and we need the front to work with this back section for the whole thing to work, and I'll get to that in a second. But you need to set this up with the coccyx being tucked under, the Mingmen opening and spreading, the jade pillow rising, leveling off the skull, and then suspension from above. And this in part addresses the spine, and what's happening along with the rest of the body, but more so we feel it here, is this traction in the spine. So all the vertebrae at least feel like they're separating from one another. All right, you get this expanding. At the same time, you're still relaxing, just from doing these couple of points. All right, so that's the legs coming up the back to the top of the head. Now we're going to come down the front. And we're going to come to the chest, and what do we hear all the time? Han Sheng Ba Bei. Sink the chest, round the back, or sink the chest and pluck the back. So basically what is happening here, and this needs to happen for the back to happen. All this stuff has to happen together. You can't leave a piece out because there will be a blockage. So Han Sheng Ba Bei, you're relaxing the chest and letting the shoulders sink down, but not slump. All right, they come forward slightly, but that's really not the shoulders, that's the back expanding, and the shoulders sit into the back. And so the back is kind of rounding in a way, but it's not slumping. I see a lot of people do this, and that's slumping. Chest sinks down, and it feels as though the sternum is relaxing, and all the space inside the chest, inside the lungs, is being pushed out. And the sternum wants to come and touch the spine. That's the feeling you should get. You should feel like the chest, if you look at it from the side, instead of here, it sinks down and moves towards the spine, and the two almost kind of feel like they want to fuse in a way. All right, so all that space that's inside the chest that we're used to goes away. Now that space has to go somewhere, and where does it go? It goes down. We need to make space in the abdomen, and we do that by releasing, stretching. All right. So if you bring your chest up, what that does is it pulls the internal organs up with it, and your chi also rises. All right, we need to sink down the chest, and the chest will not sink properly, and the back will not expand or pluck properly unless the core is relaxed. So this has to be relaxed so this chest can sink. Also, you're changing where the diaphragm usually sits in this kind of chest out position. It's getting down and going further in and down. And this Sha Dantian, the lower Dantian, and I'm just going to call it Dantian, becomes your new diaphragm. Very important when you're practicing Tai-Chi, Negong, and standing, that obviously the diaphragm is involved, but you have a new diaphragm that you want to work for. I'm going to call it that because that's where you breathe from. And you start to use this lower Dantian just the way you would use your diaphragm. So when you breathe in, it's relaxing and sitting down. When you exhale, you're drawing up, and this manipulates all the organs. And when you exhale, you just relax, it draws down. You have to relax to let it happen. This isn't done through force. Right? A lot of stuff we do in Tai-Chi and standing has to do with just letting go and let gravity do the work. All right? So that is basically the main points you want to hit when you go around the body, not including the arms. And another thing I forgot to say was I talked about these angles or the legs being bows, where your back is another bow, and it's like two bows sitting on each other and compressing each other and expanding and compressing. So your back should feel like a bow, and it feels like it's sitting on another bow, or a spring. Your back should feel like a spring, and it's sitting on another spring. And that heaviness, or excuse me, that hardness that you develop in the legs that starts to come up, creep up, eventually you have to get all these posture points correct, like feeling your Hui Ying in your bubbling wells, so that the upper body is connected to the lower body, and that hardness creeps up the spine to the top of the head, and then it starts to go out the arms, and there's your yang energy, if you will, or some people call it yin energy because it comes up from the earth, which is yin. Okay, either way, you can describe it either way. Speaking of the arms, when we hold the arms, make sure the elbows are in a down in the beginning. They might fill up later and they might change. The really important part about the arms is not the arms, it's the shoulders. If the shoulders are not sitting into the body correctly, they're popping out of their sockets slightly, and you're going to always be holding up the arms with the shoulders, which you don't want to do. These arms, even though extended, if you're doing an extended posture, are still rooted here, and they should feel supported by the bubbling wells. You should feel the hands all the way down the body into the bubbling wells. Everything drains down. Hard part of standing in Tai-Chi and Negong is going down. Once you actually get down, the energy gets down, the up part is actually a lot easier. It just comes up naturally. You've done the hard part. Getting everything down, relaxing this, chest down, chin down and in. Okay, belly sinking down, knees down, everything's going down, elbows down, shoulders down, okay? Then the hardness will come up the back. Okay, so that's the basics about, when you do the posture or even your Tai-Chi, that's what you're focusing on as far as connection to the ground, these points connecting. Now, let's just go over some possible postures you can practice and how much you should practice. So, this is a basic Uji stance, perfect. You can just do this one, right? And this is really good for grounding. Really good for grounding, more difficult to get your practice getting your coccyx tucked under because of where the position of the hands are. So as the hands rise and get further away from the body, it's actually easier to tuck under. So if you're trying to figure out how to tuck under and relax at the same time in your coccyx, you want to have, this is a very good posture with the hands low. All right. I call this hold the ball. Some people call this a bunch of things. Some people even call this a horse stance. Hands up here, you're just working higher up on the body. All right, these are the basic ones most people know if they're doing Tai-Chi and standing. Now, it's perfectly good to pick a posture from the form. You can do each posture from Grass's sparrow's tail, or each of the 8 energies. When you want to up your game, you want to choose postures where you're on one foot and you're completely separated. This leg is completely disengaged, touching the floor, but no weight is going into it. Okay, so you can practice white crane, which side you do the up hand on. So this is a very good posture to practice if you're really trying to learn how to separate your weight and strengthen your legs like crazy. Separate that weight and do single leg postures. A very good posture that I practice a lot to open the joints is single whip. I practice single whip. This is from the Michuan. Or you can practice single whip from 37 or 108. This is very good to practice getting all the joints in the body open. Now, how long should you practice? It depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do the martial aspects of Tai Chi, you need to practice a lot longer. All right? If you're really trying to go at it you really want to become a really good martial artist, you're looking at 1 hour to 2 hours every day. That's a lot. And then plus you have all your other stuff. Okay, that's what I used to do when I was much younger, much more after the health benefits today. And for the health benefits, if you're really trying to push it, half an hour a day. All right, and you want to do the equal amount of the form as you do standing. So half an hour a day. But I'm not saying if you don't have to do half an hour a day, you can do 5 minutes a day. The important thing is that you practice regularly, and then you practice every day or almost every day. You can rest a day or 2 of the week, but practicing 1 day a week, that won't work. Even if you practice for 2 hours, it's not going to work. All right, you need to practice, and when you hear the word practice, you really should think the word train. You should think about training. And being in class is not practice. That's learning. All right? So practice this every day. That's the only way it's going to work. The same with Tai-Chi and the same with Negong. If you do it on the weekends, it's not going to be that effective, unfortunately. It's like punching the clock. Well, anyways, that's my spiel on the basics of the physical aspects of standing. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment sections. Please like the video. Subscribe if you'd like to. And I will see you next time. Please stand, please breathe, please relax. Bye-bye.